Welcome to Branded Entertainment, Celebrity and Licensing, TV, Film, Mobile, PC, and Ancillary Rights. I'm your moderator, Tom Flanagan. I see there's a pretty annoying delay in my feed, so hopefully you'll hear me better than you'll see me. I blame that on being perhaps in Colorado's altitude here, but great panel today. My background, by the way, most recently is as an EVP and Managing Director at Leo Burnett, but throughout my career, my primary focus has been entertainment marketing. So a lot of the subject matter we'll touch on today, I've had a great deal of personal experience with, as well as our panelists.
Correct.
What we'll do is we'll start by having each of the panelists introduce themselves. Today we have Charles, Nina, I think Jared just joined us, Mike, Richard, and Chris. And if we can, why don't we start in that order, and each person will briefly introduce who they are and what they do and their company. So why don't we start with Charles?
Okay, thanks, Tom. I'm Charles Riato. I'm president of the International Licensing Industry Merchandisers Association, more commonly known as LIMA. We are the primary trade organization for the global licensing industry. We're based here in New York. We have offices throughout Europe and Asia and now Australia. Our members cover the whole licensing process, but they're primarily rights holders. Intellectual properties, whether it's entertainment properties, sports, fashion, art, just about anything that's that could be merchandised or marketed to consumers. And as a trade association, our main goal is to grow the industry, help raise the level of professionalism, provide educational and networking opportunities for our members, and basically be the global voice of the licensing.
I like even having a place where you can go plug in, you know, and even if it's pretty vanilla, we could be the ones that are there for that.
Because I was like,
I think
Grumpy Cat or whatever somebody said, Grumpy Cat is a charge-up place. It's a restaurant, so people could come charge up.
Jared's background, can you guys hear that?
It's just something that's so...
Yeah, I'm hearing it.
Yeah, maybe Victor can help with that.
What's interesting is have you had an issue when you've been there, you know, just having a place to charge phones and do plug in with a computer, having had that case?
Hopefully it's about branded entertainment. Okay, I think we got it there. Nina? I think you're on mute, Nina.
Hold on a second.
There we go.
Okay, so my name is Nina Samasco, and formerly I was at Nike up in Beaverton, Oregon. Prior to that, a long career in software, and so I go back and forth between Silicon Valley and Oregon, but Silicon Valley is where I am today. And of course, where this topic really comes to life for me is in two places, right? The Talent Licensing and Branding Association, as well as product licensing and innovation, especially in apparel and footwear.
Great. Mike?
Hey guys, Mike Lucy here. I head branded entertainment at J. Walter Thompson, JWT, some also know it as. We are a 220 office, 10,000 person agency, so we're big. Work with big global brands ranging from Rolex and Royal Caribbean to Macy's and Puma, J&J, Unilever, and so forth. There's a lot of stuff happening here. My primary focus is working with our clients to create things that are not ads. So these days, as content keeps evolving and broadening its scope, if you will, I get brought in to help develop and produce things that anything from a YouTube channel, launching a YouTube channel for a client, to developing a scripted comedy series, to helping build a music platform, which could have live events and content downloads and so forth. So it's a pretty interesting mix of opportunities, and I guess the operative word being it's got to be more entertainment than branded for it to be good. So, but I've had some good meetings with Tom too. So he found some good ideas off each other.
Thanks, Mike. Richard, how about a little intro about yourself and your company?
Sure. Richard Gillum, CEO of DeskSite, and we're building a new video entertainment network to essentially support alternative advertising platforms instead of simply ABC, CBS for major broadcast advertisers. We're hoping to give them a viable alternative, both in terms of scale and the experience of what a big screen app offers. Obviously, in our case, as a network, we don't actually produce our own content, so everything we do is licensing. In other words, currently we're focused upon the NFL and sports, and all of our content is licensed from individual teams. We'll be moving into NBA, NHL, and others, and it's a content licensing play across the board in order to expand our network.
Great. And Jared, last but not least.
Hi, sorry for my tardiness. I run Generate. We're a television production company. Do a significant amount of work in the brand and entertainment space. We are part of Defy Media, which is our parent company, the combination of Alloy Digital and Break, which is almost exactly a year old now at this point. And it's not my first panel with a lot of you. Mike, it's nice to see you and others. That's us.
Great, thank you.
Tom, don't forget about me.
Oh, Chris.
Yes. Yeah.
First, I want to hear about the taco shirt, Chris, and then sorry.
My name's Chris Stewart. I'm a creative director at Blast Radius. So kind of some parallel things to Mike over at JWT. So I work primarily with brands to develop concepts that include content. So whether that be micro content to full-on long form, short form, social. So working with content creators and trying to develop concepts around that.
Great, thank you. Apologize for almost missing you.
No worries.
Well, the role of licensing is becoming increasingly important and viable to generate new consumer experiences. As consumers and brands alike require more content, I see increasingly partnerships that require licensing occurring. And ancillary rights is one of the topics today. Ancillary rights, therefore, are also becoming extremely important. Even Stan Lee had to sue Marvel to try to recapture 10% of revenue that he was entitled to for things like Spider-Man merchandise and the pillowcases on my kid's bed, right? So. Charles, as someone who oversees the primary trade association for licensing, how have you seen the industry grow along with the appetite for licensed properties?
Well, Tom, I've been at Lima for 17 years now, and I can tell you without question, this is the most exciting, most explosive period that the licensing industry has ever been in. We're seeing tremendous growth internationally. We're seeing continued growth in mature markets as well. The content side of the business has opened up tremendous opportunities in all kinds of different platforms. So our members are totally engaged in that, and as everybody knows, content is extremely important. The quality content is. So I'd say content is not only the future of the industry, it's the present too. It's just the growth in that one particular segment has been unbelievable over the last few years. We'll always have our merchandise licensing, which is still a tremendous business. By the way, we estimate that the global size of the licensing industry is over $195 billion. So I think that's pretty big bucks by anybody's standards. But I certainly think we're on another level. We're about to see another wave of tremendous growth in licensing, particularly on the content side.
Richard, as you mentioned, as someone that runs a new kind of network, and someone who, of course, has to license content in the NFL, you seem to have found licensing opportunities where others had not seen it. And could you tell us a little bit about that, the development of your network, and your expansion plans to perhaps go beyond the NFL?
Sure. Obviously, as a small startup company, we don't have the capacity to offer traditional content licensing agreements like you see with, let's say, Fox or ESPN, where they commit literally billions of dollars to the NFL or other leagues in advance in exchange for content. In our case, we had to come at this a bit more creatively in order to ensure we got the content flow that we need. Today, we actually deliver an average of about 15 to 17 hours of originally produced NFL content every day, 7 days a week. We're the actual second largest distributor of NFL content. We actually distribute more NFL content than ABC, CBS, all the major networks combined. We don't do game footage other than highlights, but everything else is behind the scenes, interviews, players, coaches, chalk talks, all the kind of stuff that a super fan really cares about. That content is obviously incredibly valuable, but for us as a small company, the reality of going and offering tens of millions of dollars up front for this content wasn't realistic. So we needed to come at this at a little bit different approach here. I think that the way we went into this is replicable in other areas as well. But essentially, we provided a lot of ancillary value, and we proposed a revenue share where it allowed a large company like an NFL team or NBA or et cetera, and some of the other properties we look to pursue in the coming years here, Martha Stewart, Oprah, and others. It allows these larger entertainment conglomerates to really get a chance to see what's new out there without necessarily having to invest in it themselves. Essentially, they get the best of all possible worlds. If a given product or platform becomes successful, well, they're already vested and they're ready to go. If it doesn't, they didn't have to go out there and create a lot of effort, a lot of money, a lot of employees and overhead to try something out that may not be successful. So I do think that given the Internet's explosion here within disruptive cycles of new media here, we do see opportunities where smaller companies can actually put together licensing deals for the crown jewels, if you will, with larger entertainment brands if they're bringing enough additional value to the table. Again, it doesn't mean that brand's going to continue that licensing agreement indefinitely, but if you bring something that is compelling, then usually they'll give you a shot, particularly if you're looking for that rev share opportunity, maybe some equity along with it. There's ways to get to those kinds of deals done. You need to be creative. You do need to bring more to the table than simply, hey guys, we're one more distribution point. But I think if you do that, then you're going to see these brands interested in exploring other opportunities to expand their brand equity across the spectrum, certainly digital.
Right, cool. Oh, and by the way, in case I forgot to mention, but we want this to be interactive. We would like people to tweet questions for you guys, and when they do that, if they would, please hashtag Digital Hollywood, and we'll try to keep track of those as best we can. And I know Richard, like Nina, has a technology background as well, and so you both have experience with software licensing, and of course, Nina, at Nike, you've seen firsthand how companies license components for their technologies to improve product design and make people like LeBron James insanely wealthy as well.
Yeah, he's very proud of his new shoe, for sure. He loves the fact that his name is on it, which is fabulous. And also, I think we'll see in November, Under Armour actually did something pretty interesting in the past year. They actually teamed up and licensed some technology from a guy whose name is Scott Peters. He invented a magnetic zipper, kind of for the handicapped, actually, and I believe it was for one of his relatives. And they have licensed that and really are coming out with jackets and things like this with this innovative magnetic kind of one-handed zipper. So here again is where you don't necessarily think how important these type of licensing agreements can be, and the impact that they can have in apparel and retail. So for sure, I've seen that in the industry. Yeah.
Great. And Mike, as a pioneer in brand content, I'm calling you old, by the way. Tell us about how licensing has affected your client work. You mentioned some of your clients, like Macy's, for example. Obviously, their business model is very dependent upon the clients?
Yeah, so Macy's is a good client of ours, and probably their business is based on licensing. So when you go into a Macy's and you see those products that have a celebrity attached to it, they don't actually spend any money. They don't do endorsement deals, I should say. What they do is they do licensing deals with talent, and there's obviously a value exchange between Macy's and the talent. And Jessica Simpson or P. Diddy or Martha Stewart, whoever they've been working with, have probably made a lot of money. I'm not aware of what they have made, but I know they've done quite well based on a licensing agreement versus if they were just getting endorsement contracts, if you will. So when it comes to content, they've been applying the same principle to that. And we're trying to develop ideas, and they have a history with that too, I should say, because the parade, they license that to NBC, the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. The fireworks show they do every 4th of July, they license that to NBC. Yes, Virginia is a program we created for them here at J. Walter Thompson, and that's now licensed to CBS, and that's a perennial sort of holiday classic that CBS is playing. And from all this, they've realized content going forward, entertainment programming that they're doing going forward, that they apply the same principles as any producer of great entertainment. Great talent, great story. There's an audience interest, or there's a need from an audience for this type of content. Then they will approach it with licensing type mentality. They'll want to try to find a distributor and partners that are willing to co-deficit the production dollars. If it's someone that's willing to distribute that with a fee, great. If it's a distribution deal based on other terms, that's great too. But the mentality is about licensing content versus just sort of producing and kind of paying your way into the audience. So we're trying to build, with the Yes Virginia franchise. The extension of that includes a book we did with HarperCollins and a DVD we released. Those sell out every year, but they also license that product out to non-Macy's, to Walmart. Walmart sells the DVD, Amazon sells the DVD. So it's all based on the principles of creating something that has a demand and kind of develop terms that are best for the brand, but also make good business sense as well.
Hey Tom, not to usurp your facilitation, but hey Mike, I was wondering, does Macy's do we also recently saw in the press the huge bidding war over Kevin Durant between Nike and Under Armour, right? Where really Kevin Durant in the end totally won with that $300 million licensing contract that Nike had to pony up. Do the retailers like Macy's, do they do the same thing with the designers and the P. Diddy's and the Jessica Simpsons? Are there those type of issues that come up in retail?
They definitely want their exclusive relationships. So I mean, if you recall, a year or two back, JCPenney's tried to do a deal with Martha Stewart, and that got litigious. I think they went to court on terms of that. But when it comes to Tommy Hilfiger is an exclusive relationship through Macy's. There's other brands that would not go exclusive, and they don't. But they have great relationships with them. I think what's interesting about when it comes to the celebrities though, is they probably get a lot. I don't know the ratio, but they get a lot of inbound calls. I think every talent agency and manager knows the people at Macy's because they know there's a big business opportunity if they can get them a capsule and launch a fragrance or a handbag or a piece of clothing. And so they are in a fortunate position to be able to, I think, pick and choose who makes sense for them. So they don't whereas obviously Under Armour, Kevin Durant, he can kind of call his shots. I think Macy's in a good position to call theirs. But that being said, I know there is talent out there that they would love to work with, and they that eventually they very well could. But talent's talent. They have their terms too. So
of course.
Yep.
And Chris, as a creative, your work with both brands and celebrity has often resulted in the co-creation of content as opposed to just simply licensing it. I mean, is that to me that makes it less reliance on traditional licensing or arrangements, or less need for that sometimes. Can you tell me about kind of the trends that you see in working with celebrities and brands?
Yeah, I can't speak specifically to licensing agreements. It's kind of outside of my realm, and someone handles it for me in most cases. But as far as brands and their alignment with celebrities, we're seeing a pretty significant shift, especially when people want to, or brands want to focus on the millennial and the millennial plus target is what is more of like kind of an influencer approach. So It's really not about getting that endorsement and having the attributes of whatever that brand is trying to push, spoken by that individual, but the brand kind of co-opting with that creator, someone who's already out there and is creating things, already has an engaged audience, and finding the right those right individuals, and then partnering up and being, the brand itself will help enable a project that this one particular influencer wants to do. Or, we see it being really successful with, brands partnering with already existing content platforms. So, like the Creators Project from Intel is a pretty good example of that, where the brand isn't forcing itself, too aggressively into that piece of content, but helping co-opt it and helping create it. It's allowing the creators themselves, to take the attributes of that brand and apply it so that it fits with their audience. And with a millennial target, we see that working with a lot of success, especially across all these different types of content platforms that we see now with, micro content like Instagram, and, kind of social quick digests, bringing a brand in and allowing someone who already has, that audience adapt those attributes has worked really well.
Hey, Jared, you've seen the impact of licensing from, different sides of the table. At CAA, it's someone who actually represents the talent side, and then, of course, as a creator and producer yourself. What role does licensing and ancillary rights play in your world these days? Perhaps Walking Dead Halloween costumes, for example.
Funny you should mention that. We're in the middle of some stuff with Greg as a creator for things that really fall right down that line. I mean, I think everyone's sort of touched on it. The realities is that talent, for the first time in maybe ever, there used to be this sort of echelon of the Michael Jordans and the Andre Agassi's in that sort of for all of us on the panel from the 80s. We all remember that. But that was sort of where this world started. Then you have the Jessica Simpsons of the world who have become multi in the hundreds of millions of dollars of value from the Macy's relationships and others, all the way now into the land of the influencers that have been given opportunity to do things at sometimes a scale that can break out, but oftentimes at a smaller scale as well that has real value. Talent, as creators, are looking at themselves as licensors of all the pieces of their business in a way that they never did before. It used to be you'd spend a lot of time praying for a book deal if you were a chef. In a lot of ways, if you're a chef today, the book deal is a licensing deal, very different than it used to be before. Before that was the job, was you wrote a cookbook. Now the cookbook is a licensing portion of what you're doing in the macro sense of your business.
Chris and Jared, as the music industry has gone through, its trials and tribulations, the revenue to artists through sync rights and licensing of their music has become increasingly important. How have you seen that market? I mean, I'd love to hear each of your perspectives. When you need to acquire the rights to use music in your work. Maybe start with Jared.
That's a tricky one, because at the end of the day, music is the thing that ties all of what we do together more often than not. It is a critically important piece of all the movies and TV shows and digital pieces that we've all been a part of making. I think, to me, on the music side, the biggest shift we've seen in the world is there's not 50 artists or 100 artists anymore. There's tens of thousands of artists now. So trying to go through a process where you find that music that you want, it is very easy now to make a phone call to Sony or whomever it is, to Warner Chappell, whoever you're making a licensing and sync deal with, for a very specific piece of pop music that you are aware of. If that deal can't be made within the parameters of the budget that you're living in, and we've all seen our budgets go from this to this because we're making more, you start spending a lot of time with up-and-coming artists and emerging artists. I've spent a lot of time in the shows that we've done with the young agents around the business and young managers around the business, introducing myself and introducing our projects to new artists. Because unless it's, and again, I know we're picking on Macy's a lot in this conversation, but unless it's Macy's, it's very specific to tie the music that they want, and in that case, there becomes a secondary licensing value to the artist and to Macy's for being involved in a Demi Lovato song or a big, huge artist song, you sort of slide into the next spot, which is what's the right music for the piece, and the licensing of a specific song becomes sort of secondary because there's so much choice out there.
Yeah, and I can kind of speak to this on two sides. Like when we think about music for a particular piece, a lot of times from a creative standpoint, there is such a large pool that we almost think about things that are like the pop song that we want. Knowing what the budget is, you can kind of almost dive deeper into that genre, and find some artist on the fringe that really captures whatever emotive quality you want, and bring that in at a much lower rate than you would if you were to try and get that particular song. And then from a musician, I work kind of outside of my 9 to 5. I do a lot of stuff with EDM artists. Mostly around unique ways to distribute their music. So as far as working with an artist like Flosstradamus, who's kind of an up-and-coming EDM act, they rely really heavily on licensing of their music more so than the selling of their singles. So like almost the majority of their catalog is entirely free, or distributed through some social means, meaning like tweet to receive, or trying to pull some kind of social equity or some kind of promotional equity, and then they make a lot of their money out of live shows as well as licensing to other properties.
And Richard, I believe your business model, you've had experience with musicians who perhaps wanted to license your technology or record labels?
Sure. We've got experience working with Universal Music Group, particularly in the hip-hop space, largely with Interscope Records and Jimmy Iovine's original stuff from back in the day. These artists range from bigger acts like 50 Cent and Eminem, certainly some smaller stuff, breaking things like Bobby Creekwater and some names you guys may not have ever heard and probably never will. But these artists are desperately looking for ways to start to leverage, as it was mentioned earlier. It was the chef who his big win might be getting a book deal. Today it's an omni-media world, very well stated, and we see this really in music, particularly where and I'll use a good example. Soulja Boy was an artist that came out of nowhere, and thanks to YouTube and the platform, this guy was able to explode almost overnight and turn that into some successful record deals. We're seeing another trend is very interesting. There was an artist, Nipsey Hussle, who was originally signed under Sony, one of their sub-labels, and left the deal and became actually more successful on his own through the internet for probably a couple of years. And now is coming back to major labels, having built that brand equity. Again, speaking to what was mentioned earlier with respect to the fact that brand equity value, you use the EDM space, it can be leveraged. Another company that we're actually working with a bit more now is we're seeing some companies that are taking these emerging artists that don't necessarily have a brand name at all, and these guys are basically turning themselves into a production house, and they go and create music on demand for incredibly low rates. You get license in perpetuity, so it allows those smaller budget productions to be able to start to access something close to it. The company we actually started using is called Future Hits, run by a guy named Brian Bonwell, and they've got an artist repertoire of 500-600 artists that basically they go out there and bid it out, if you almost crowdsourcing your next musical score if you need it. The internet has enabled this, and so the crowdsourcing of this, they customize it for you. They give you a few iterations, you make a couple inputs, and then that's that, flat rate licensing for perpetuity, and you're off to the races. So while we are seeing an explosion in terms of the productions that need music, as it was mentioned earlier, with 10,000 music artists out there, we're also seeing the internet come in to the rescue, if you will, and create an incredibly efficient way for smaller budget productions to actually get good music, the right kind of music for their production, to own it and to basically bake that license into their production and own it in perpetuity.
And Mike, it seems to me that a lot of us actually, when we have conversations like this about branded content, branded entertainment, a lot of people I think forget they consider music as content. Tell us about some of the music projects that you briefly alluded to that you're working on.
Well, we worked with Smirnoff. They're not a client right now, but we worked with Smirnoff for quite some time. You know, from a licensing perspective, it was less about music. I should say less about licensing tracks and licensing relationships, having relationships with artists, and then having rights to the content that would be coming out of that. So, you know, Smirnoff was one of the Nightlife Exchange project. We had Madonna in there. I mean, it was a very limited deal. I mean, we can get a lot of rights out of it. But you know, we were essentially licensing the use of her to promote this program, and then the content coming out of it was generated from an event we did with her at Hammerstein, and you know, it probably could have gone bigger had we had more rights to it, but we didn't negotiate the deal, so it sort of came to us that way. You know, Macy's is looking at a lot of music. They have, and right now we're probably planning some strategy for them related to music. But the key being, it's all, you know, we know it's the driver for millennial sort of activity. I think that the importance for that we're trying to stress is you need like the labels wanting 360 rights to everything. The brands need to have as much rights as possible too. There's so many extensions and things and ideas that come out of a great piece of music or a track or a relationship with an artist, and it's really just trying to emphasize to people that the more we can kind of include in those terms, the more we can develop from, and I think it's also better for the artist that's licensing back to us, because I think there's just many more ways we can be activating with them as well. And what I keep finding is that, you know, the talent and the people representing them, they want bigger deals. They want bigger sort of platform. The one-off is a hard thing to, you know, they don't generate much of one-off. You know, you need bigger relationships, and I think more people are flexible in sort of what the value exchange can be these days as well. So I think there's, especially in music, there's a lot more opportunity, I think, to develop meaningful relationships, you know, when you're starting at the right point with each other.
Charles, with your association, what is the, when you think about the makeup of your membership, how heavily is that entertainment companies, movie studios, record labels, etc.? Can you tell us a little bit about like the kind of members that you have?
Yeah, well, you know, if you get right down to it, it's all entertainment. But you know, speaking specifically of studios and you know, those types of operations, probably about 45 to 50% of our membership is on the entertainment side of it. But again, we also have most of the sports leagues as members who do have a tremendous revenue stream based on their licensing programs. The fashion brands also are very heavily into licensing. You know, a lot of people, I think, aren't quite aware that some of these great brands are not actually manufacturing the merchandise; they're licensing it out. We're seeing a lot of activity from artists now who, you know, up until a few years ago, their only opportunity for revenue was basically by sales of their works of art. Now they're licensing it into all kinds of different product categories, home, fashions, even apparel, and lots of other categories you can think of. So, and then beyond that, corporate brands are licensing too. Again, we're talking about a little bit of a different business model, but a lot of companies who have built great equity in a particular area or a particular product category are now licensing the awareness of that brand into similar but non-competing product categories. So we're seeing really a cross-section of different types of companies who are really using licensing as a way to enhance the emotional connection that they have with their consumers and build on that.
Charles, you might remember this, but back in the day, I know Under Armour, just to gain brand awareness of their brand, put themselves and had licensed into a movie, whatever sports team it was in the movie would be wearing, you know, the Under Armour brand, which I know was big for their brand awareness. And I'm going back, you know, to the early days when Kevin Plankton started the firm. So to your point, I think people don't realize those licensing opportunities even between the apparel, footwear manufacturers and, you know, a Hollywood studio.
Yeah, Nina, I agree completely with you. There's several additional examples of the one you just gave, but that's absolutely a great example.
And Nina, you know, at Nike, fascinating company for a number of reasons. Known for innovation, of course, in apparel and footwear, but also has become quite the technology innovator. How does that process occur? Like the balance, what happens internally versus technology that's being licensed?
Oh, it's insane. So yeah, Nike right now, their IT group is actually bifurcated into two different sections. One whole team is really focused on consumer technology and everything consumer facing. So the Fuel Band, many of you may even have the Nike GPS watch, which has the TomTom kind of GPS technology licensed with it. And then there's the whole other innovative component on the enterprise side, the kind of, what runs the company, the collaboration tools the internal employees use are always cutting edge. I mean, Nike is absolutely at the forefront of many of the software, and that's ergo the close connection always with Silicon Valley for the designing tools and so forth. Yeah.
Back to Jared and Chris for a second. We can talk a little bit about, licensing obviously is a focus of a lot of our conversations today. But our audience would also like to hear about working with celebrities. Chris, like for example, YouTube celebrities has become an industry unto itself. I don't think any of us really expected to see how big this could be. And as an agency person, structuring relationships with those people and brands. Can you tell us a little bit about that process?
Yeah, I mean, I think like a lot of choosing the artist is really key, depending on what brand you're trying to get them to align with. And I think the biggest piece advice I can give to brands that are thinking about doing a platform or doing co-opting content is you want to make sure to give the creativity over to the creator, right? So I've worked with kind of some larger names and done some more celebrity style, creative in the past, where it's like, okay, celebrity, these are the bullet points you need to hit. This is what we need to talk about. With the YouTube sect and micro content creators such as the Vine stars, it's really just about taking their shtick and applying your brand and inserting that brand into their already established thematic. So millennial audiences can kind of sense a poser from a mile away, and these celebrities already have their kind of established audience, and you just want to latch onto that and kind of insert your brand into, the creative that they're already doing. So it's really a lot easier, as far as working with those types of artists, because you bring them into the creative process really early, and you work together so that you can figure out what the output's going to be. And I think that's the key, is making sure that you're not having one of these, content creators or already creative types just endorsing the product or forcing them to kind of run through the feature list, but you're allowing them to interpret it and go through their own creative process so that they have something that makes sense to their already engaged audience.
I mean, the way that we usually approach that is, and Chris, I agree with everything you said, is when you hire a YouTuber as a brand, you're hiring a partner. When you hire a more traditional celebrity, you're hiring an endorser and an actor. And there's a huge difference because at the end of the day, as Chris said, when you're hiring and working with these YouTubers, the piece that you're more often than not most interested in from the media side is the scope and the footprint of the media. The difference is that these YouTubers have a better relationship with their audience on a day-to-day, one-to-one basis than any celebrity that's ever existed and probably will ever exist again.
Yep.
And there are a lot of traditional celebrities that spend a lot of time balancing both sides of that universe to play catch-up, if you will, on having a good relationship with their actual audience. But their careers aren't based on the audience. Their careers are based on guys like all of us who have cast them into roles and they're working of their acting craft as opposed to the working of their personality craft. And it's a very big difference in the way brands approach it. We're in the middle of 3 campaigns right now that are both sides of that. As a producer in the middle of it, the the bilingualness of understanding which job you're doing at which time is important, but really from the brand's understanding when they're making that purchase and making that relationship, what the basis of that relationship is from a creative perspective with creative people.
Yeah, I think that we've seen the most success when we kind of just let those, creators, and it is that partnership. It's like, hey, we want to enable you to do this. Here's, whatever that recoup is, and show us, create something that's in your voice. It works significantly better than when you try to, kind of embed, more traditional, advertising lingo into, these individuals.
I think Jared brings up a really great point. It immediately questions the ROI analysis that a brand needs to do, given the price points of traditional celebrities versus the YouTubers. The price delta, of course, is significant. The question becomes, with a little bit more elbow grease, perhaps a few larger number of YouTubers, can you get a much more effective net result for your brand because of that intimacy they have with their fans, as opposed to, let's say, a LeBron James? You're going to get these guys at a much lower rate, of course, but you're going to have to perhaps get more of them to get the same reach. What does that ROI look like at scale over a period of a year or two? A new campaign, a new shoot, and what have you. But I think it's a really interesting point. I'd be interested to hear Nina's thoughts on that from a brand equity perspective, and really looking at the that YouTuber, in mass compared to your traditional.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point. And, back to the whole Kevin Durant's kind of vicious argument that we just saw in the press regarding Nike and Under Armour. I mean, the fact that Under Armour's revenues, I think, are only, $2.3 billion, and they, I forget what their final offer, but we know that Nike ended up at a $300 million number. I mean, when you look at what Under Armour's total revenues are and what they were ponying up to get Kevin Durant, it's unbelievable. And of course, so much analysis goes into the ROI and really the target that you're trying to reach, right? Yeah, it's definitely some science behind it, for sure.
Well, when we talk about product innovation and licensees, I think Apple is probably the best example of that. From the iPod became, unlimited number of licensees that that product spurred an industry onto itself. At Nike, I think again that's an area that's fascinating a lot of people that I work with, is how they've moved into that space so seamlessly. Could you tell us a little bit about your role while you were at Nike?
Sure. I was in IT. I know that's shocking, given my software background. I was in IT. And, of course, Nike does maintain a very special relationship with Apple. Tim Cook is actually on the Nike board. And those of us who use the Nike products know it is very seamless to plug your Fuel Band into your Apple device, and it works just great. Nike also, of course, is supported now on Android as well, and so I think, I think all of these apparel, footwear, and kind of device manufacturers, it's interesting to see which ones are going to really try to maintain an open platform and partner with everyone, versus really, kind of choose iOS versus Android as a platform. Nike primarily was heavily iOS, and now I think just when you look at the scope of the world and what's happening with the mobility space, you cannot ignore globally the Android users. So interesting times.
Great. Richard, tell us a little bit about your product itself, and how you get the content from the different NFL teams, and what the experience is like from a technology standpoint.
Sure. Before I mention that, I'll just add to Nia's comment there. It is interesting, where this licensing stuff is going within the technology space. And with Microsoft's massive adjustment here with Nokia, and really almost an abandonment of other manufacturers, wholesale, if you will. It's an interesting dynamic. It's almost we're seeing a bit of Apple's old school platform where they just wanted to have control the technology themselves. We're seeing Microsoft take a page out of Apple's book from back in the day, where they're coming in and really favoring a particular specific platform device developer here for for their OS. I'm not sure that's going to help them or hurt them, of course, obviously, but those guys wouldn't have spent that kind of money if they didn't think it was going to be the right direction. Tom, to answer your question, what we do is it's fairly straightforward. From a business model, I think is the easier way to sort of understand our business. We're here to solve two problems. Obviously, DVR penetrations reach 50% of American households. This is a problem for Nike, for example, other major brand advertisers. You want to reach U.S. audiences, you're spending about $70 billion a year to do it through television ads. Unfortunately, a big chunk of those are getting fast forward, and I fast forward ads. I admitted it. And it's horrible to say this. I mean, we're in a licensing panel here, and the reality is we all understand that for those business models to operate, if Nike or McDonald's or Adidas spends X millions of dollars to reach U.S. audiences, and those returns, that ROI, that investment, is faltering due to massive DVR penetration, again, clearing 50% of American households. That's not a sustainable business model. We see it still in place today simply because it's a juggernaut. It takes 20 minutes for an ocean liner in the open ocean to come to a full stop. The 100-car train doesn't stop on a dime. But at the end of the day, the CMOs, these larger brand organizations, at some point are going to say, guys, we're not getting what we paid for. I'm not seeing the cars move out of the showroom after spending $1.2 billion on broadcast television last year like I did pre-DVR days. So what are we going to do about this? Internet's the obvious solution here. Second element there, of course, is reaching younger demographics. This has become a big challenge. I've got two boys, 24 and 25. I'm a tech geek, but my kids don't watch TV, not because I'm a tech geek. They do everything on the internet because that's just their age range. This is the new. So if you're a brand and you want to get that, you want to get that in front of that consumer, you've got to be able to reach them on their platform, their choice platform. Of course, this is obviously the internet today. So what we do is we're essentially taking what we think is a great business model. It's been around since the late 40s with the Ed Sullivan Show. Best ad unit ever created, we think is the TV commercial. Ironically, the TV set's no longer the best delivery platform for a TV ad. Instead, we think it's the internet. So we're building a video entertainment network to support that new reality. And we look to well-recognized entertainment brands to be able to provide that. In other words, we build some really cool platforms, but the greatest flat-screen TV in the world is not going to be interesting to somebody who's just got a test pattern on it. So we have to. Licensing is probably the most important element of our business, in that these licensing deals that we do with these entertainment brands, that's what fills up the screens on our devices. We go out there for these what we call a big screen app. We don't focus on smartphones. We're, again, focused on the TV model. There's no question that mobility and certainly smartphones are a fantastic opportunity, but there's so much in that space. It's really crowded. It's really commoditized. At some point it's going to start to break out, but really the big numbers are still in the larger screen devices. I mean, broadcast television ad dollars still dwarfs online video. So we're going after those budgets rather than the online video budgets. But to attract those, you need the right kind of product, and we believe that's the big screen. We don't do anything less than 10 inches on tablets or above, so it's laptops, desktops, smart TVs, Blu-ray, PlayStation, Xbox, that kind of stuff, where that end user is getting the best of both worlds. They're getting the internet experience, the absolute curation of on-demand content, combined, of course, with what we believe is the big screen approach. It's going to give comfort to large brand advertisers that are used to advertising on television and are leery of taking their $2 million commercial they spent, producing, having Joe Pick a direct that new Audi commercial and sticking it on your smartphone that doesn't necessarily bring that richness and experience to the end user, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, and don't sell yourself short. Having NFL official content is quite the coup.
It was, yeah.
We have a question about product integration for the agency folks, and any experiences, good and bad, that you may have had with product integration into film and television programming.
So as far as product integration, I can't speak directly to having. There isn't any campaigns that I've done that I can recall that kind of worked on that level. I mean, all the stuff that we've done was we brought in, created content that brought the product front and center. But so I can't particularly speak to that from my experience.
Mike?
Yeah, I've done a few integration deals. Not with Jay Walter though. It's been before my previous jobs. They're usually media deals though. They're usually just sort of based on ad sales driving terms with a buy or with. For instance, I worked with the American Legacy Foundation a few years ago, who does the anti-smoking campaign, and we did a deal with Biggest Loser when it was probably at its peak of a show. So it was a pretty, it was through Electus or then Reveille. We just basically integrated, an anti-smoking message in with the doctor that kind of counsels some of the contestants, and one of them I think was a smoker still and trying to lose weight, and so it was an easy sort of fit, but. It wasn't terribly sophisticated, if you will, for what we're seeing now. I think now integration. I wouldn't even recommend an integration probably to a client unless it was just obvious that they, unless you are, getting pitched a Michael Bay movie and your car can become Bumblebee, then yeah, maybe you can.
Right.
Other than that, I don't know if it's really. I don't know what the immediate impact is, other than just keeping in front of your consumer, your fans. And staying part of pop culture, I think they tend to be overlooked, and unless it's very relevant and organic to what's going on for the brand. And I think those same dollars now. What I see with clients, like maybe a few years ago, when clients would want to say, "Hey, we got these discretionary dollars. Should we look at this or do something that's sort of more of a placement or media buy?" I think we're now seeing like, "Hey, can we go create something and create our own channel on YouTube or add to a channel on YouTube or build an experience that is, maybe we bolt on to an existing music festival or we do our own thing around it." So I find those are probably more relevant and more engaging, obviously, for the people that are going to be using and experiencing it too.
Yeah, that's one thing, just to kind of echo what you just said, Mike. I think the things that I've seen out there and some trends that I've seen rising as far as like integration, a lot in the experience space. So, EDC partnered with T-Mobile and Snapchat to deliver, Wi-Fi to everyone who was at that festival. Right. So it's like those types of integrations, and right. You see a lot of different ways that it's executed. If you go somewhere like South by Southwest, where there's good implementations of, kind of the embedding of a product, and less good. And I think the more contextually relevant the product is to the experience or to the content, the better and more
absolutely
well received.
I just met this morning with guys that produced the Bonnaroo Music Festival, and one of the things they've done really well is just providing that context. So they have it's a 3-day festival in the middle of Tennessee. Hygiene's not always going to be the easiest thing to maintain, so they bring in shampoo brands to give you a shower and wash your hair, and or Crest will give you toothpaste samples, and so things like that, which I think are, anyone could do those, but it's much more meaningful when you do it that way. And I think, if you're going to integrate with someone else's equities, make sure it brings out your equity too. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
From an agency standpoint, how many of your clients, are looking towards you guys to help them innovate more via brand extensions? Again, it might be licensing opportunities. For example, Under Armour, or not Under Armour. Nina's got me thinking of Under Armour now. Armor All obviously has equity in automotive, and have moved into even like vacuum cleaners for the cars, et cetera, et cetera. I know more agencies focus on that than others, but what's the role of kind of innovation, real innovation, at any of your agencies?
I mean, for Jay Walter, it's we like to talk about it, and we like to propose it. It's still a hard sell sometimes, I think, to a lot of clients. If it's not an organic, just easy extension from the campaign or the content or the story. We do have some smart guys. We have some developers and different people, pitching ideas, and we want to do more. We want to do more of it. I think clients, they need their campaigns, they need their content and then the innovation will happen if it sort of extends from that. I mean, a good example for us as an agency, we had De Beers, not here in this office anymore, but for years we handled De Beers, and we helped them innovate or invent what essentially is for them was the right-handed diamond ring. You know, women, a ring that women could buy for themselves or not have to be connotated with, you know, with an engagement. So, you know, another product's coming out of that. So sort of, you know, just an insight we had, and we said you could create a product and sell that, and create a new category for yourself. So I think there's always a push and a desire to find new categories that we can add value to a client. The challenge as an agency is our business model sometimes just doesn't allow us to participate in ways that you'd want to participate. So there's always the considerations you have for that. So, you know, it's like that's a more of a finance department discussion.
Yeah, I can agree with everything that Mike just said. You know, I mean, especially, you know, one thing I notice, and you know, we'll come up with a campaign, and being a lot of brands these days are not looking at a single agency to, you know, flesh out their concepts. We're looking at, you know, things that are faceted by discipline. So, you know, Blast Radius is a digital agency, so we may come up with a concept that extends into other, you know, areas, but then it becomes, you know, an issue of territory a little bit. So, like having concepts to be, you know, from, you know, above the line all the way through from a single entity is sometimes challenging from that regard.
Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of product extension deals coming from our membership too. But you know, Mike, you're exactly right. It's got to be an organic transition. The leap can't be too far from the core brand to the extension, or it's just not going to work, and consumers just aren't going to buy it.
I just noted, we noted the geographical makeup of the people on the panel is pretty amazing. I think we actually have every part of the country covered. So I appreciate you guys in the different time zones that almost all of us are in taking part today. Next question, I'm trying to read some tweets as I'm talking to you guys right now. People asking about celebrity nightmares. Working with the best celebrity experiences and the worst. I know, Chris, you worked with Russell Brand.
So I worked with working with Russell Brand was phenomenal. He's a phenomenal talent, and it was pretty mind-blowing. Like, getting into like the specifics of the project, as we came in, we actually had 3 days to put scripts and the full production together, because this was kind of something that was written into the contract where they had some digital opportunities for digital content outside of the broadcast, but they just didn't have a plan for it. So we came in, and this was back for HP for the touchpad launch. So we had a whole bunch of different product features that we needed them to hit. So I came with these really long scripts, and you know, walked him through them, and he's like, all right, just put this down: Twitter, Facebook, digital butler. And then what was on the teleprompter was just like those 3 notes, and he would sail on for 7 minutes just with pure gold. You know, completely disregard the script and just be able to kind of riff on it. And super nice guy, really flexible. So that was a really positive experience, because you know, as much of a panic as it was to put that together, he made it really easy. So I don't really have any nightmares. I mean, every celebrity that I've worked with has always brought more to the table, and I think if you give them, you know, just in working with a celebrity, if you give them that opportunity, you know, you're not necessarily, you know, you're trying to pull as much of their own out of them and bring them into the creative process. It usually works out pretty well.
Yeah, I would say it's not about, they're not billboards. I think a lot of times in advertising,
right, exactly. Yep.
People look at these personalities, these celebrities, as like just they're work for hire. I mean, they're brands, they're talent, they're very creative, and I think if you approach them with a lot of respect and approach them as a partner, then you get a lot more through a deal. I think it's when you kind of approach them with, you know, hold this here, or may hit this mark in the shot there, or say this, or tweet that. That's when they kind of shut down. It can be difficult, and I think you know, I think it comes back to the idea. If you have a creative idea that really works for them and they like, they'll give you a lot more, because inherently they're creative people too and want to see great ideas come to life like anyone else. So.
Yep, it's really essential that the right people are aligned with the right brands. You know.
Yeah, I feel like the public though probably doesn't know how collaborative, as an example, Nike works with the athletes in designing the shoes that bear, the Jordan, Jumping Man Jordan, and, LeBron's new shoe. These athletes come in and are very engaged in every aspect of the design process, and I think that the general public probably doesn't realize that. They might think, oh, they just, slap LeBron's name on that shoe and there you go. Not at all. Nike partners and teams very closely, the designers do, with the athletes. And, from Nike's standpoint, we've had amazing experiences with all the Nike athletes.
That's great. And I guess, Jared, I'm sure you would attest to the chemistry in the room is so critical, just as it would be on any production when they're working with an agency or brand people.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think that one of the things, just to get back to the nightmare piece, is the talent has realized the marketplace for their own services has changed. 10 years ago, there was a very small list of talent that could break through. Now the talent realizes that outside of very specific opportunities, the brands have a lot more choices. So the way that they approach the experiences are much less nightmarish than they used to be, because when you run afoul of the experience and run afoul of being a good partner, you find out that the phone doesn't ring again. So it is an important piece of how the marketplace and ecosystem overall has changed. And I think very different from, one of the things that I always love about sports relationships is, to me, different than any other relationship. LeBron wears the actual shoes 82 nights a year, yes, playoffs. Tiger Woods plays with the golf clubs. Rory McIlroy plays with the golf clubs. So, and it's not, to me, it's not licensing or endorsement. That's a true partnership, right, in a way that is beyond what anything else we're talking about is. But that all talent really has begun to understand the value of that.
That's great. Well, I think our time is up. I want to thank you again for taking part of this, and hopefully we'll see you at Digital Hollywood in Los Angeles, or one of the future Digital Hollywood events. So more information at digitalhollywood.com. Thanks again, guys. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.